Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Higher Education Capital Matching Grant Program, or HECap, webinar presentation. This is the same program that was presented previously, but those of you who joined that know that there were some technical difficulties. So we are doing this from the beginning again. I will answer the questions that were submitted last week and any others that came in since that time. So thank you for viewing this. I hope that you will find it helpful as you work towards preparing your applications that are due August 28th. This is Sarah Richards. I am the Senior Director of Grants Administration, and I've had the pleasure of working with many of you in the past, either with other HECap grants or with grants under other programs administered by DASNY. DASNY does act as staff to the HECap board in connection with this program. The first slide depicts the key dates, which I think you are all familiar with. The eligible project dates are September 1, 2020 through September 1, 2024. The request for grant applications was issued last January, and we received a few questions to that. We posted responses to them, and the application deadline has been extended to August 28th. We expect to receive those, review them, and announce awards not earlier than December 2nd, 2020. So that is what we are looking at in terms of milestones for this program. The opportunity posting for reference as you complete your application is located on the DASNY website. And as not-for-profit entities, all colleges and universities do need to be pre-qualified in the Grants Reform Gateway portal. I think that you are all familiar with that process, but please make sure that you remain in pre-qualified status. Institutions can come and go out of pre-qualified status based on filings that are due, et cetera. So please do keep an eye on your document vault in the Grants Reform Gateway and make sure that at all times during the process, including the payment requisition process if you are awarded a grant, to make sure that you are pre-qualified, because if not, DASNY will not be able to recommend to the HECap board that the grant disbursement agreement be entered into, and we will not be able to approve any payment requisitions that we receive for review. We are going to walk through the application process and talk about some things that will help your application be stronger in comparison to others. A lot of this, if you've participated before in these HECap webinars, it is review. There were no substantive changes to the HECap statute since the last time there was a request for grant applications, but we do find every round that there are folks who don't understand certain provisions, so we'd like to walk through it again so that everybody has a good chance at submitting a quality application for an eligible project and receiving an award. And key among those, and these seem self-evident, but please answer all questions. Review the question, make sure you understand it, and give a complete answer to it. We are looking for projects that ideally have received all regulatory approvals needed or can demonstrate that such approvals will be obtained in the not too distant future in time for the HECap project to be completed by that 2024 deadline. Please provide all documentation and information that's requested and sign the application. And the individual signing that application should be someone who is authorized to bind the college or university contractually. If you do not know who that is, please inquire with your institution's attorney or someone in the business office. That is an institution-specific determination, and DASNY is not going to be able to provide you with that information because we won't know either. Grants Reform Gateway, I'm not going to dwell on this too much because I think everyone probably knows the process, but before we enter into a contract and payout, that you do need to make sure that you are in pre-qualified status in all respects. The critical component of your application, and the one that is worth 50 of the 100 available points, is the project description and narrative. And I can't stress this enough. You should provide a robust project description that explains the goals that you are trying to achieve as a result of undertaking the project to be funded by the HECap grant. If it's to, build a new rec center on campus, please explain how that will meet one of the stated statutory objectives which are outlined there for you. Either enhance the programmatic offerings at the institution, provide economic development benefits to the surrounding area, or enhance student life at the institution. Those are broad categories, and we would just like to see some tie to the expenditure of public dollars with the benefits that you are hoping to achieve. It's fine if the project only does one of those three. It's fine if it does two of those three or three of those three. You only need one. But please explain to us in the application, with as much detail as you can of the benefits that will be obtained. And that will enable your application to be viewed more favorably. Project budget. Each application will undergo a financial review. The goal of the HECap program is to award grants to institutions that have the ability to complete the project within the specified time frame. There is a 3-to-1 match requirement, which again is not new. It's been there from the beginning. These are non-state funds, so you need to come up with 3 times the grant amount out of funds, either from the college's own resources or other non-state sources. Please keep in mind, and we've had some confusion about this in the past, so I just want to highlight, if you've been awarded a grant, whether through the SAM program or the HECap program or any other discretionary grant program by an elected official or elsewhere in the state, that is state funds. So those grants cannot be used as part of your 3-to-1 match. They can be used towards the project if the project total exceeds the college's 3 times match and the grant. So, if you're getting a HECap grant of $1 million and your total project is $20 million, then obviously you've got a ways to go over and above the grant and the 3-to-1 match amount, and you absolutely can use the grant for the excess. But if your project comes in at exactly, the amount of the grant plus your 3-to-1 match, you're not going to be able to use those state grant funds towards it. The HECap grants can only be used for capital costs, and we can talk about this in a little more detail later, but capital costs do not include things like rent, utility payments, lease payments on equipment, or cloud-based software licensing fees. In the past, we've had folks apply for projects that would include cloud-based computing and things of that nature, and they do not qualify as capital costs within the meaning of the state finance law. The next thing we'll need to see is an estimate for your project. We need to see a professional estimate describing the HECap project and setting forth the cost to complete the project. So that would include, design, engineering, the capital cost to complete it. We'd like that estimate to come from someone who is experienced in the construction area. We understand that you probably don't want to go out and spend a lot of money to get estimates if you don't know if you'll be proceeding with the project until you get the grant. In that case, it's fine to have experienced facility personnel complete the estimate. If they've had experience with that before, that's absolutely fine. It can also come from an architect, contractor, or a vendor. It does not need to be a formal bid, but it does need to be, maybe on the letterhead of the architect or from the facilities professional. It can't be scribbled on a napkin, so to speak, or something that gives no background. We need to know that the estimate is real and there has been some analysis of what the project will actually cost in the end, so that nobody is surprised to find out that the project comes in far above or far below the estimated amount. Funding sources. We get a lot of questions on funding sources, and there's a wide array of sources that can be used to come up with a 3-to-1 match requirement. It can come out of the college's bank account, other grants, other loans if you're taking out loans, if bonds have been issued to fund the project either through DASNY or through other issuers, we'll need to see that. If you're using institutional funds for any part of the non-state match, please provide your most recent audited financial statements. You can see the source of funds listed there. If you have any questions about them, please do reach out. I do just want to say, too, before we move off this, and this has happened a few times, please do not assume that DASNY has the financial information about your institution through other means that will form the basis of our financial review. What do I mean by that? I mean, we are fortunate enough to count some colleges and universities among our clients, and we do have in other areas of DASNY certain financial information in connection with those transactions. However, please do not assume that our reviewers for your HECap application will have access to that financial documentation, because they will not. All they will be looking at in terms of when they review your application and score it is the information that you provide with your application. So even if we have stacks or files full, large multi-megabyte submissions of financial documentation about your college or university that we've used in the past, unless you include it with your application, we are going to assume it has not been submitted, because we are not going to go to other departments and get that information. So please provide it. Unfortunately, that has hindered some entities in the past that have assumed that we have access to information and that we've reviewed it. In a similar vein, don't assume that, we have reason to believe or a basis for determining that certain colleges or universities, have the means to pay for this project without backup documentation. We've had that happen as well. And, while we're happy that some colleges and universities are in that position to be recognized as strong, have a strong financial footing, again, please provide the evidence of other funding sources. We don't like to, not award these grants because of a lack of information, but unfortunately it can happen. Construction contracts. This is an area that I also want to spend a little bit of time on. The HECap statute and the provisions of the statute are also incorporated into the grant disbursement agreement, require that Appendix B be incorporated into the construction contracts. And Appendix B contains information regarding the payment of prevailing wage for all construction contracts. As a condition of accepting a HECap grant, the colleges and universities agree to pay prevailing wage and comply with other provisions of the labor law that are set forth there as a condition of getting the HECap grant. We understand that as private institutions, you may not otherwise be required to pay prevailing wage. However, if you are looking to the HECap grant to fund your project, that is something that will need to happen. And not only does it need to happen, but the provision saying so in mandating that contractors pay prevailing wage need to be in your construction contracts. So please take Appendix B, which is on our website, and make sure that that is incorporated into your contract with your contractor. If you've already entered into contracts, then Appendix B should be appended to it. And if you've received a grant in prior rounds, this has always been a requirement, as I said, but the Attorney General and the Office of the State Controller do need to approve each grant disbursement agreement and each contract. And if these provisions are not there, they will not approve it and you will not be able to get paid. And I can't emphasize this strongly enough because we've run into so many issues with this. DASNY does not have any discretion in this area. It's a statutory requirement. The Attorney General looks for it. And if it's not there, they won't approve your contract. And we feel really badly, believe me, when we are in that position of having to talk to colleges and universities and tell them that their grant will not be forthcoming and we can't make payment because of lack of evidence that there was compliance with these provisions of the contract. So please, please, please do that. And here is what Appendix B looks like. This may be one of those things that you tend to gloss over when you're looking at the RFA or your contract, but it's really important that you understand that this has to be included into your construction contract, and you also will need to demonstrate compliance with 15A of the executive law, which is minority and women-owned business requirements. And Amanda is going to talk about that specifically when I'm done talking about the general provisions. So that is the general section about how to complete an application. The three main takeaways from this that I would say is please provide a robust project description, professional estimates. Do not assume that we have any financial information on your institution, and please incorporate Appendix B into your construction contract. And I will go through and talk about the questions that came in during the live WebEx presentation when we did that, so that those of you who ask questions can have your questions answered and everybody can benefit from them. One of the questions that was frequently asked is electronic submission of applications. Will that be allowed? And the answer to that is yes. It will absolutely be allowed and encouraged. We have confirmed with our IS department that an email of your application will be fine. Our system can handle that. If you feel for whatever reason that it's too large for email, please give us a call well in advance of the application deadline if you think we are going to have to make other arrangements. But generally speaking, we would request that you try to submit your application electronically via email to the HECap RGA email address, and we will make sure that this is posted for everyone to see so that folks are well aware of what the email address is and where you should submit your application. Another question that came up was whether or not colleges and universities can submit for costs incurred to comply with the COVID pandemic. And the answer to that is that the same rules apply to those types of costs as what apply to any other costs. One, they have to be capital in nature. Certainly, I think you could make a case that they enhance student life by providing health and safety benefits. And they're probably in the nature of renovation costs or technology purchases. Again, I would caution that if they're, to enhance remote learning opportunities, we cannot use grant funds to pay for cloud-based software and licenses because it's not capital within the meaning of the state finance law and other tax laws. But certainly equipment, renovations for the equipment, all of those can absolutely be funded through the HECap grant. To the extent that there is, say, a renovation of a building underway and before, they've already occurred before the eligibility date, but the renovation is continuing and that's the project you want to fund. That was really, I think, what the question was from the person who asked about it. And the answer to that is if costs have been incurred prior to the eligibility date, they can be used, towards the overall project, but it can't be reimbursed from the grant. You can count them towards the match, but they can't be paid for with the grant. And again, we'll put this in writing so that it's clear. But I think the takeaway from that is COVID-relating costs, absolutely can be funded out of the HECap grant as long as they otherwise qualify. And that's really it. If those of you viewing this WebEx asked another question during the presentation, please feel free to email that to us and we'll do our best to get an answer to you and to everybody so that everybody has the benefit of the answer to your question. We were experiencing technical difficulties, as you know, so if there are questions that came in that we didn't see, my apologies for that, and we'll do our best to get to it. And now I am going to turn over the presentation to Amanda Solwald. Amanda is in the Grants Administration Unit here at DASNY, and she will have the day-to-day responsibility for working with you to complete the documentation that you'll need to demonstrate compliance with the MWBE requirements. A lot of you have probably worked in the past with Monica Norris of our counsel's office, and Monica will remain involved in the project to give sign-off to these, but Amanda will be your day-to-day contact in terms of emails and calls and helping walk you through the documentation. So without further ado, I am going to turn this presentation over to Amanda.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Just like Sarah said, my name is Amanda Solwald. I'm going to be doing the presentation on the MWBE portion of the HECap grants. So the MWBE goals are 18% for minority-owned business enterprise participation and 12% for the women-owned business participation. And that's on any grant award in excess of $25,000 for commodities and services and $100,000 for construction projects. And just note that the MWBE participation may exceed the 18 and 12% goals. So today I'm going to discuss both exhibits that have to do with the MWBE, which is Exhibit F1, the Utilization Plan, and Exhibit F2, which is the request for waiver. So this is the what page 1 of the Utilization Plan looks like. Section A is just going to be the grantee's information. This is not the spot where you put the contractor's information. That comes later. So fill out Section A with the college's information. And then Section B is the project information, which is where you're going to put the goals. So again, the MBE goal is 18% and the WBE goal is 12% for an aggregate MWBE goal of 30%. So the example here is if there's a $500,000 grant, the overall project is $2 million due to the 3-to-1 match. Therefore, 18% of the $500,000 grant is $90,000 for the MBE goal, and 12% of the $500,000 would be $60,000 WBE goal. So that would go over on the left under the MBE goal and WBE goal section. This is page 2 of the utilization plan. Section C is the use of the MWBEs, and this is where you're going to list all of the contractor information. So you're going to list any consultants, contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers. Note that no other MWBE consultants, contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers will be accepted if they're not on this page. And if your organization will be requesting a total waiver, you would just leave this section blank, sign and date, and return the form with the request for waiver, which we're going to discuss next. And please be sure to do the following before submitting your utilization plan to DASNY. Just reference the New York State Certified MWBE website that's listed there. And then also please reference the New York State Department of State Division of Corporations website for your contractor or subcontractor, whoever you list in section C in the previous slide. Just note that we will check these when we get the plan. So, you know, if you do it ahead of time and make sure that they're in there, it will just cause less issues down the road when we are reviewing it. Please also keep in mind when checking in both of the New York State MWBE website and the corporation's website, be sure to list the vendor's name as it appears in the databases, which should be the vendor's legal name. If it's not, though, please list what they are registered in these sites. It will be easier to find them that way. And also one last thing to note is we cannot accept New York City registered MWBE firms. They have to be registered with New York State as either an MBE or WBE firm, whichever you choose. And they can be registered as a New York City firm, but they have to also be registered as a New York State firm. So now we're going to discuss Exhibit F2, which is the request for waiver. It looks pretty similar to the utilization plan. This is page 1 of the waiver. Section A is going to be the same. It would be the college information. And then Section B is also going to be the same. The MBE goal is 18%. The WBE goal is 12% for an aggregate percent of 30. The same example as before, your MBE goal would be $90,000 based off the $500,000 grant, and the WBE goal would be $60,000 based off of the $500,000 grant. This in section C, the MBE waiver, you're going to select total waiver if you're requesting a 100% waiver. And then you're going to select partial waiver when only selecting a certain percent of the waiver to be requested. Same thing with the WBE. You're going to select total waiver if you're requesting 100% waiver, and only select partial waiver if you're doing that. So the example is the MBE goal is 18%. The grantee has met 10% of the MBE goal, and they're requesting a waiver for the remaining 8%. So you would select a partial waiver, and the goal, and you'd be selecting it for the 8% because 10% was has been met. And then in section C3, that's your statement of justification. You're going to write a statement explaining the basis for your waiver, and this is going to be done for a total waiver and a partial waiver, whichever one you're selecting. Just because you're doing a partial doesn't mean you can get away with not doing the basis for a waiver. So good faith efforts. What constitutes a good faith effort? A waiver of the goals will only be granted if the grantee can demonstrate good faith efforts. So some examples, you can visit the ESD website. You can solicit New York State certified MBE and WBE firms. You can publish advertisements for participation by New York State MWBE firms in appropriate general circulation, trade and minority or women-oriented publications. You can take steps to reasonably structure the contract scope of work for the purpose of subcontracting with or obtaining supplies from certified MWBE firms. Some sample documentation of good faith efforts. You can list and copy any advertisements. Provide a list and places of advertisements that were published along with the date and copy of the advertisement. You can list all New York State certified MWBEs appearing in the New York State directory of certified firms that were solicited. Provide the list from ESD as well as copies of emails sent to each MWBE firm. You can get a description of contract documents, plans, or specifications made available to New York State certified MWBEs, and then the date and manner in which the documents were made available. You can also give us a copy of all the responses received from New York State MWBE firms. You can provide documentation of any negotiations between the grantee and or contractor and the MWBEs. With that, you would just include copies of letters, emails, etc., discussing the negotiations. If the responses to the solicitations were received, but an MWBE firm was not selected, just please explain why. You can include a copy of notice of application receipt issued by ESD if that's applicable, and then any other information deemed relevant. How can I complete the utilization plan if my organization has not yet put out the specifications for the contract? You can reach out to MWBE or SDVOB firms. You can explain the situation to them, assess their availability, interest, and capability in the project. Complete the utilization plan, and then provide a signed letter and documentation stating that you have contacted these firms and that they have expressed interest in bidding in your project. These are the letters. Once you give the plan and or waiver to DASME for review, once they're reviewed, we will send out either a waiver letter or the acceptance letter, which is for the plan. And then with one or both of those letters, we will send this MWBE compliance report, which will be used later on for the reimbursement process. And that concludes the presentation on the MWBE portion of the HECap grants. Any questions can be directed to the email listed below.